in the quiet corners of our collective memory. Some stories remain unfinished, waiting for the passage of time to reveal their hidden truth. This is the story of Morgan Aryn Bauer, a 19-year-old with dreams as vast as the South Dakota sky she left behind. In February 2016, seeking independence and adventure, Morgan made a journey to Georgia, a place of promise and new beginning. But within days of her arrival, her digital presence went silent, her phone went dark, and she vanished without a trace. For 7 years, her mother Sherri refused to let her daughter's story fade, holding on to hope while investigators pursued leads that went nowhere. The case grew cold, the media moved on, and the world seemed to forget Morgan Bauer, except for those who loved her most. But after years of silence, a single clue would shatter everything. Before I tell you what happened, comment your country and time below. Morgan Aryn Bauer had always been a dreamer. Growing up in Aberdeen, South Dakota, she spent countless hours scrolling through social media, imagining a life beyond the flat horizons of her hometown. At 19, with a spark in her eyes and determination in her heart, she made the decision that would change everything. She was moving to Atlanta, Georgia. It was February 2016, and the promise of opportunity beckoned like a siren's call. She was excited and nervous, but mostly ready. Her mother, Sherri Keenan, would later recall, her voice trembling with the memory. "I remember helping her pack, making sure she had everything she'd need. We talked every day after she got there." At first, Morgan arrived in Georgia on February 12th, 2016, stepping into a world vastly different from the one she'd known. The humid air, the sprawling cityscape, the endless possibilities. It was everything she had imagined and more. She briefly worked in Gainesville, Georgia, taking whatever job she could find to establish her independence. Her social media posts from those early days painted a picture of optimism and adventure. "Atlanta is amazing," she wrote on Facebook, accompanied by a photo of the city skyline at dusk. "So different from home, but I'm loving every minute." Behind the scenes, however, Morgan was navigating the challenges that come with starting fresh in an unfamiliar place. She stayed with acquaintances she'd met online, moved between temporary living situations, and worked to build a social network from scratch. Her digital footprint during this time reveals a young woman reaching out, making connection, and trying to find her footing in a new environment. The last week of February 2016 brought subtle changes to Morgan's online presence. Her posts became less frequent, her messages more cryptic. On February 25th, she shared a photo of Yellow River Park in Porterdale, Newton County, with a simple caption, "Beautiful places." This would be her last public post. Behind the digital curtain, Morgan had connected with Jonathan Alexander Warren, a man who lived in the Porterdale area. Their interactions, reconstructed later through phone records and witness statements, began innocently enough, a casual online introduction that evolved into plans to meet. Warren presented himself as friendly and trustworthy, someone who could show Morgan around her new home state. On February 28th, 2016, Morgan's phone pinged for the last time near Yellow River Park. Then silent. When Morgan missed her scheduled phone call the next day, Sherri initially didn't think much of it. Her daughter was busy building a new life, after all. But as hours turned into days with no contact, concern grew into alarm. By March 3rd, Sherri had filed a missing person report with the Atlanta Police Department. The initial investigation moved quickly at first. Detectives traced Morgan's last known location to Porterdale, interviewed Jonathan Warren, and searched the area around Yellow River Park. Warren claimed he had met with Morgan, but that she had left on her own, without evidence of foul play. And with Morgan being an adult who had voluntarily moved to a new state, investigators faced significant challenges. We had a missing adult who had recently relocated, who was establishing new connections. Detective Marcus Riley of the Atlanta Police Department would later explain. The circumstances were concerning, but we didn't have the evidence to suggest a crime had occurred. Weeks turned into months. Search parties combed through wooded areas. Volunteers distributed flyers with Morgan's smiling face. Sherri traveled from South Dakota to Georgia multiple times, pushing for answers, meeting with investigators, and keeping her daughter's story in the public eye. But as leads dried up and media attention shifted elsewhere, the investigation slowed. The case of Morgan Aryn Bauer was heading toward the cold case file, leaving behind a family in limbo and a community with unanswered questions. What had happened to the 19-year-old with dreams of independence? Who was the last person to see her alive? And why had she simply vanished from the face of the earth? In the absence of answers, speculation filled the void. Some believed Morgan had run away, started fresh somewhere new. Others whispered darker theories, that she had fallen in with the wrong crowd, that she had been trafficked, that she had met with foul play. But without evidence, these remained nothing more than theories, ghosts haunting the edges of a growing mystery. By the end of 2016, the active investigation had stalled. The Atlanta Police Department, Newton County Sheriff's Office, and FBI had exhausted their immediate lead. Morgan's case was officially designated as cold, joining countless others in the vast landscape of unsolved disappearances. For Sherri Keenan, this designation was unacceptable. She refused to let her daughter become just another statistic. She created awareness campaigns, maintained social media pages dedicated to finding Morgan, and never missed an opportunity to speak about her daughter's case. Her persistence became a beacon in the growing darkness, a testament to a mother's love that refused to fade with time. But as 2016 turned into 2017, and then 2018, the world moved on. The flyers became weathered, the social media posts received fewer shares, and the community's attention drifted elsewhere. Morgan's story seemed destined to remain unfinished, a mystery lost in the passage of time, in the quiet corners of Newton County. However, secrets were waiting to be discovered. The truth about what happened to Morgan Aryn Bauer lay hidden, buried beneath layers of deception and time, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Time moves differently for those left behind. While the world continued its relentless march forward for Sherri Keenan and those who love Morgan Bauer, time had frozen on February 28th, 2016. The first year without Morgan passed in a blur of pain and determination. Sherri established rituals to keep her daughter's presence alive, lighting candles on Morgan's birthday, setting an extra place at the holiday table, maintaining the same phone number in case Morgan tried to call. Every holiday, every special occasion, there was this emptiness, Sherri shared in a 2018 interview with a local newspaper. People mean well when they say time heals, but they don't understand. For us, time just means more time without answer. The second anniversary of Morgan's disappearance brought with it a harsh realization. The world was forgetting. Media coverage had dwindled to nothing. Community searches had ceased. The Atlanta Police Department had reassigned detectives to newer cases. Morgan's story was fading from public consciousness, becoming just another unresolved case in a system overwhelmed by similar tragedy. Sherri refused to let this happen. She launched a renewed awareness campaign, creating a Facebook page titled Finding Morgan Bauer that meticulously documented every aspect of her daughter's case. She shared old photos, memories, and updates on the investigation or lack thereof. She reached out to true crime podcasts and bloggers, anyone who might help keep Morgan's name in the public eye. I made a promise to my daughter, Sherri wrote in a powerful post on the third anniversary of Morgan's disappearance. I promised her I would never stop looking, never stop fighting for answers. Some days, that promise is the only thing that keeps me going. The passage of years brought subtle changes to the physical landscape of the investigation. The Yellow River Park area, once carefully searched, had grown over with new vegetation. Businesses had changed hands. People had moved away. Witnesses' memories had faded. Details blurred by the passage of time. In Porterdale, where Morgan had last been seen, life continued uninterrupted. Jonathan Warren, the last person known to have seen Morgan alive, went about his daily routine. He had been questioned multiple times, but never named as a suspect. To the casual observer, he was just another resident in the small Georgia town, carrying on as if nothing had happened. But in the quiet moments, the shadows of Morgan's disappearance lingered. Local residents who remembered the initial searches still wondered what had really happened. Law enforcement officers who had worked the case still kept Morgan's file in the back of their minds, marked with the designation that haunted so many families. Cold. As 2019 gave way to 2020, the world faced an unprecedented crisis with the COVID-19 pandemic. For many, the pandemic brought life to a standstill. For Sherri, it amplified the isolation she had felt for years. Locked down in South Dakota, unable to travel to Georgia, she channeled her energy into online advocacy, connected with other families of missing persons, and raising awareness about the challenges of cold cases. During the pandemic, I spent hours on the phone with other parents who were going through what I was going through. Sherri recalled, we became each other's support system. We understood things that others couldn't. The 5th anniversary of Morgan's disappearance passed with little public attention. By then, most had given up hope of finding answers. But Sherri's persistence had caught the attention of someone unexpected, a cold case detective from Newton County, who had recently taken on a new role reviewing old files. Detective Sarah Mitchell had a reputation for tenacity and an eye for details others might miss. As she reviewed Morgan's file, something caught her attention, a discrepancy in the timeline of Warren's statement, a detail that hadn't been fully explored. She reached out to Sherri, reopening lines of communication that had grown dormant over the year. I don't know if this will lead anywhere, Mitchell told Sherri during their first phone call, but I promise you, I'll look at this case with fresh eyes. For Sherri, this conversation reignited a spark of hope that had been dimming for years. After so long, someone was finally taking another look. As 2021 progressed, Detective Mitchell began quietly reinvestigating Morgan's case, interviewing witnesses who hadn't been spoken to in years, reviewing evidence with modern forensic technique, and building a timeline that differed from the original investigation. She worked methodically, aware that cold cases required patience and persistence. The breakthrough, when it came, was unexpected. A technological advance in DNA analysis allowed investigators to re-examine trace evidence collected during the initial investigation, evidence that had previously been deemed inconclusive. The results pointed toward a possibility that had been overlooked. Morgan had never left Porterdale. This revelation shifted the entire focus of the investigation. If Morgan had been killed and buried in Porterdale, her remains might still be there, waiting to be discovered. Armed with this new information, Detective Mitchell and her team began planning a detailed search of areas connected to the original persons of interest, chief among them, Jonathan Warren. But before they could act, they needed more evidence. They needed to build a case strong enough to justify the resources required for a comprehensive search. They needed to connect the dots that had been scattered across 7 years of silence. As 2022 began, the investigation entered a new phase. What had once been a missing person case was now being treated as a potential homicide investigation. The cold case was heating up, and after years of waiting, the truth about what happened to Morgan Aryn Bauer seemed closer than ever. Sherri felt the shift in the investigation. The phone calls from Detective Mitchell became more frequent, the questions more specific. There was a renewed energy that hadn't been there before. After so many years of silence, suddenly there was movement, Sherri said. I didn't dare hope too much, but for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe that we might finally get answered. In the small town of Porterdale, life continued as usual. Jonathan Warren maintained his innocence, claiming he had cooperated fully with the original investigation and had nothing more to add. But beneath the surface of daily routine, the past was stirring, ready to reveal its secret. 7 years is a long time to wait for answers. For Morgan's family, it had been a journey through grief, frustration, and unwavering determination. They had navigated the darkest corners of loss while holding on to a sliver of hope. Now, as the investigation entered this new phase, that hope was beginning to grow. But after 7 years of silence, something was about to change. The Newton County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit operates with a quiet determination that belies the dramatic breakthroughs they sometimes achieve. In early 2023, Detective Sarah Mitchell and her team prepared to execute a plan that had been months in the making, a comprehensive search of property connected to Jonathan Alexander Warren. We had to be methodical, Mitchell explained in a later interview. After 7 years, we couldn't afford to miss anything. We needed to bring in the right experts, the right technology, and the right mindset. The search, conducted in March 2023, brought together an impressive array of forensic specialists, cadaver dogs, and excavation equipment. The property, a modest residential lot on the outskirts of Porterdale, had been owned by Warren since before Morgan's disappearance. It was a place that had been searched superficially during the initial investigation, but never with the intensity and precision that the cold case team was now bringing to bear. For 3 days, the team worked systematically, grid by grid, layer by layer. They used ground-penetrating radar to identify areas of soil disturbance. They brought in forensic anthropologists to recognize signs of decomposition. They employed advanced DNA testing techniques that hadn't been available in 2016. On the 3rd day, as afternoon light filtered to the Georgia pine, they found what they were looking for. Initial examination suggests human remains, the lead forensic anthropologist announced quietly, her voice carrying the weight of years of unanswered questions. We'll need to confirm through DNA analysis, but the location and condition are consistent with someone who went missing 7 years ago. The discovery sent ripples through the law enforcement community. For Sherri Keenan, the call from Detective Mitchell brought a complex mix of emotion: grief at the confirmation of her worst fears, relief that the mystery might finally be solved, and a dawning hope for justice. I always knew in my heart that she was gone, Sherri said through tears. But knowing is different from suspecting. There's a finality to it, but there's also a path forward now, a path to answers and accountability. As forensic experts carefully excavated the remains, investigators turned their attention to building a case against Jonathan Warren. The discovery of Morgan's body on his property was damning, but prosecutors needed more to secure a conviction. They needed to establish motive, opportunity, and intent. The evidence began to accumulate, like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. Phone records showed more extensive contact between Warren and Morgan than initially disclosed. Witnesses came forward with new information, encouraged encouraged by the renewed investigation. Digital forensics experts recovered deleted messages and search histories that painted a disturbing picture of Warren's interactions with Morgan. Perhaps most significantly, advances in DNA technology allowed investigators to connect trace evidence from Warren's home and vehicle to Morgan: a hair on a car seat, skin cells under a fingernail, blood spatters that had been too small to analyze in 2016. Now, these microscopic fragments told a story that couldn't be ignored. By May 2023, investigators had enough evidence to make an arrest. Jonathan Alexander Warren was taken into custody without incident at his workplace in Covington, Georgia. The charges were severe: malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, concealing a death, and tampering with evidence. The community of Porterdale reacted with a mixture of shock and grim satisfaction. Many had long suspected Warren's involvement in Morgan's disappearance, but without evidence, suspicion had remained just that, suspicion. Now, with the arrest and the revelation of Morgan's remains, there was a sense that justice might finally be served. The Newton County District Attorney's Office prepared for what they knew would be a challenging case. 7 years had passed since Morgan's death. Evidence had degraded, memories had faded, but they had something powerful on their side: modern forensic science, and a mother who had refused to let her daughter's story be forgotten. As Warren awaited trial in the Newton County Detention Center, investigators continued to piece together the timeline of Morgan's final days. What began as a casual online encounter had, according to prosecutors, evolved into something sinister. Warren had allegedly lured Morgan to his property under false pretenses, then attacked and killed her when she resisted his advances. The details that emerged during the investigation were chilling. Evidence suggested that Morgan had fought back, that she had tried to escape, but she had been overpowered, her life cut short in a place far from home, surrounded by people she barely knew. For Sherri and her family, each new revelation was both painful and validating. The truth was darker than they had imagined, but it was the truth nonetheless. After years of uncertainty, they finally had answers. "I think about her every day," Sherri said in a statement released through the district attorney's office. "I think about the fear she must have felt, the confusion, the betrayal. It breaks my heart all over again. But knowing what happened, knowing who did this, it allows us to move forward, to focus on holding him accountable." As summer turned to fall, the case against Jonathan Warren grew stronger. Forensic evidence, witness testimony, and digital records created a comprehensive narrative of what happened on that February day in 2016. The prosecution team prepared for trial, confident in their case, but aware that the passage of time presented challenges. In the Newton County community, the case served as a stark reminder of the dangers that can lurk beneath the surface of everyday life. Morgan's story resonated with parents and young people alike, a cautionary tale about trust, vulnerability, and the importance of safety when establishing new connections in unfamiliar places. For the cold case unit that had worked tirelessly to bring Morgan's case to this point, the impending trial represented a culmination of months of intensive work. But it also represented something more, a fulfillment of their commitment to never give up on the victims whose voices had been silent. As 2023 drew to a close, the stage was set for the final act in Morgan's story, a courtroom drama that would determine whether justice, delayed for 7 years, would finally be served. The Newton County Courthouse stood stark against the winter sky as January 2024 began. Inside, the courtroom was filled with a quiet tension, a mixture of anticipation, grief, and the somber recognition that justice, when it finally arrived, would be bittersweet. Jonathan Alexander Warren entered the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, his expression unreadable. The man who had lived freely for 7 years while Morgan Bauer lay buried on his property now faced the consequences of his action. The charges were severe: malice murder, tampering with evidence, concealing a death, and in a particularly disturbing twist, necrophilia. The trial began with opening statements that painted two starkly different pictures. The prosecution described a calculated predator who had lured a vulnerable young woman to her death. The defense, in contrast, suggested a tragic accident followed by panic, though this narrative would struggle to align with the mounting evidence. As the trial progressed, a timeline of Morgan's final days emerged with painful clarity. She had arrived in Georgia full of hope and excitement. She had connected with Warren online, believing him to be a friendly local who could help her navigate her new environment. She had agreed to meet him at Yellow River Park on February 28, 2016. From there, the evidence suggested events had taken a sinister turn. Prosecutors presented forensic evidence showing that Morgan had been taken to Warren's property, where she had been attacked and killed. The most damning testimony came from forensic experts who detailed the evidence found on Warren's property and in his home, evidence that directly linked him to Morgan's death. Perhaps most difficult for the court to hear were the details of what happened after Morgan's death. Evidence suggested that Warren had not only killed Morgan, but had also committed acts of necrophilia before burying her body on his property. These revelations sent shockwaves through the courtroom and the community at large. Sherri Keenan sat through the testimony with remarkable composure, her face a mask of controlled grief. When she took the stand to deliver a victim impact statement, her voice was steady but filled with emotion. "For 7 years, I didn't know what happened to my daughter," she said, her eyes fixed on Warren. "For 7 years, I imagined every possibility, hoped for every outcome except this one. Learning the truth was devastating, but not knowing was worse. You took my daughter's life, her future, her dream. You buried her on your property like she was nothing, like she didn't matter. But she mattered. She matters to me, to her family, to everyone who loved her. And now, everyone in this courtroom knows what you did." The impact of her words was palpable. Even Warren seemed to shrink under the weight of her statement. As the trial neared its conclusion, it became clear that the prosecution's case was overwhelming. The forensic evidence, the digital records, the witness testimony, it all pointed to Warren's guilt. Faced with the certainty of conviction and the possibility of a harsher sentence, Warren's defense team began discussing a plea agreement. On January 18th, 2024, Jonathan Alexander Warren changed his plea to guilty. In a quiet voice, he admitted to killing Morgan Bauer, concealing her death, and tampering with evidence. The necrophilia charge was dropped as part of the plea agreement, but Warren's admission to murder carried the most weight. The judge sentenced Warren to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As he was led from the courtroom, there were no outbursts, no dramatic scenes, just the quiet finality of a case that had haunted Newton County for 7 years. Outside the courthouse, Sherri addressed the media, surrounded by family members and supporters. "Justice has been served today," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "But it doesn't bring Morgan back. It doesn't erase the pain of these past 7 years. What it does is provide a measure of accountability. It says that what happened to Morgan mattered, that she mattered. And to anyone out there who is waiting for answers in a cold case, don't give up. Keep pushing. Keep speaking out. Keep believing that justice can prevail." The resolution of Morgan's case sent ripples through the community and beyond. It highlighted the importance of cold case units and the advances in forensic technology that can solve crimes years after they were committed. It also served as a sobering reminder of the dangers that vulnerable young people can face when navigating new environments. In the weeks following the trial, the Newton County Sheriff's Office saw an increase in tips on other cold cases. Inspired by the resolution of Morgan's case, Detective Sarah Mitchell and her team continued their work, knowing that each solved case brought closure to families who had waited far too long for answers. For Sherri Keenan, the journey wasn't over. She established the Morgan Aryn Bauer Foundation, dedicated to helping families of missing persons and supporting cold case investigations. She became an advocate for legislative changes to improve how missing person cases are handled, particularly those involving vulnerable young adults who have recently relocated. Morgan's story doesn't end with conviction. Sherri explained in an interview several months after the trial. "It continues through the work we do in her memory, through the lives we touch, through the changes we make to prevent other families from going through what we went through." As spring arrived in Newton County, the yellow flowers bloomed along the banks of the Yellow River, a poignant reminder of Morgan's last social media post from the park. The community moved forward, but Morgan's story remained etched in the collective memory, a cautionary tale and a testament to persistence. In the end, Morgan Bauer's journey from South Dakota to Georgia had been tragically short, but her legacy would endure. Her story had exposed the dangers faced by young people seeking independence in unfamiliar places. It had highlighted the critical role of determined law enforcement officers who refused to let cold cases remain unsolved. And it had demonstrated the power of a mother's love to move mountains, to keep hope alive in the darkest of time, and to ensure that even after 7 years of silence, truth would find its voice. This case reminds us that justice may come late, but it never vanishes entirely. It reminds us that behind every statistic, every cold case file, every missing person flyer, there's a human story, a family waiting for answers, a community seeking closure, a life that mattered and continues to matter despite the passage of time. Morgan Aryn Bauer's story is one of tragedy, but it is also one of perseverance, determination, and ultimately of justice served.